Why other attractive neurodivergent men struggle in friendship with other men. Now, I really wanted to dive deeper into this and make more videos about the perspective of being a conventionally attractive man but having a neurodivergence. So that can be dyslexia, dyscalculia, ADHD, autism, giftedness, or dyspraxia, any type of neurodivergence that affects your way of thinking, being, feeling, perceiving the world, and interacting with the world. Now, there is this stereotype that neurodivergent people struggle with social interactions, but I really want to focus on why conventionally attractive neurodivergent men often get into conflict with other neurotypical men and why they struggle with friendships. We all know that if you are conventionally attractive as a man, that your first competition will be another man who believes or assumes that he may not be on the same level of attractiveness like you. This automatically creates a friction between who is, the most strongest, the buffest, the most ripped, most handsomest of the group. This is just how normal neurotypical men interact with each other if they compete for something they want, oftentimes for mating purposes. However, when you're neurodivergent, things kind of change because your brain is wired differently. And let's say, for an example, we take the classic ADHD in men for an example. Men with ADHD in general seem to be more sensitive to rejection. They seem to be more sensitive to social isolation, social abandonment, all these things. And at the same time can struggle with social connections because they tend to be more forgetful if the information that their brains are processing aren't really stimulating. And this has to do with the fact that their dopamine sector is very different than a neurotypical brain in that region, because neurotypical can hold their attention for 30 minutes up until like an hour onto some sort of like low stimulus activity. But with neurodivergent brains, which we have studied in neuroscience, we see that the brain, the regions of the brain that actually has to do with concentration and focus, is shaped entirely different and gets only stimulated or severely activated, which we call hyperfocus, when the brain is processing information that gives dopamine. But if the information is not really that dopamine stimulant, then the attention span is quite low. So when neurodivergent attractive men get social interactions with other men, conflict tends to arise not because of different opinions or whatnot, but because they tend to become very forgetful and miss social cues due to not being able to hold attention. And you can actually make a lot of clumsy mistakes just because you cannot concentrate. And in social spheres where social status and dominance really matters, if you are a conventionally attractive neurodivergent man, you are already a competition for 90% of men who may be under 6 foot or who do not take care of themselves and whatnot. But if they spot a weakness, which is that you are forgetful or that you are more prone to forgetting detail or not being able to focus or concentrate for long, then they're going to use that as their advantage to try to take you out of the game by tarnishing your character, saying that you're clumsy, that you're lazy, that you're an idiot, all these things. They're going to do that because they see a weak spot, because they cannot compete with the fact that you have a great face, a good body, you're tall, you're put together, you're handsome. They cannot really attack that. They cannot say, he's like an ugly short dude. Other men cannot say that. But what they can say is that, he's an idiot because he cannot even remember what I told him 10 minutes ago. He's clumsy. He's quite sensitive to rejection. he cannot focus, he's hyperactive, so acts like a goof. So all these, stereotypical traits that we assume with ADHD, I would actually say ADHD 2, type 2, and type combined. So that's the hyperactive, impulsive type of ADHD. Now with autism, things get actually more strange. So if you have you are a conventionally attractive neurodivergent man with autism, and you're like in between 6 foot, 6'4", buff, you can be Caucasian, white, or like any type of ethnicity can be attractive. Symmetrical face, all these things that make a male face like attractive. But you have autism. So there's a difference between how you look and how you process the world. And how you process the world is in more hyper detailed and pattern focused and more sensitive to sensory stimuli. And because you are so focused on people, their body language, their movements, their eye coordination, their hand movements, their tone of speech, how they say things, how they phrase things, and then all of a sudden the weather, because you're sensitive to your environment. People with autism, the reason why they oftentimes socially flop is not because they cannot pick up on social cues. They actually pick up on too much social cues, but they struggle with processing it in a way which they can respond to it. So that's a very negative stereotype, that people who have autism cannot read social cues. They can read social cues, but reading it and properly responding to it and interacting with it are two completely different things. So what happens with conventionally handsome autistic men is that they already are in their own headspace and think differently, behave differently, feel differently due to neurodivergence tendency to be more metacognitive and meta-aware of themselves and of others. The way that they process the external world is very different. They experience things on, you have like HD and HQ. Their entire the way of processing is very different than, let's say, neurotypical people or whatnot. And because they are so hyper focused on social cues and whatnot, they notice what is going on, but they cannot actually register it in such a way that they can respond to it in a proper way. So you have a conventionally attractive autistic man who is getting attention from other women, and other men see that, but they can also see that he's introverted or he's more into himself, because most autistic men are introverted, and neurotypical men perceive introversion as a weakness because they equate strength, power to social dominance. And we often equate social dominance to people who are extroverted, which, I don't think should be actually the case, because you have a lot of extroverted people who do not exude any type of charisma or charm, but are simply just very annoying to be around with. So
I still don't want some.
And if you know these things, you can actually tell that a lot of autistic people tend to be more into themselves, inwards themselves, focused on themselves, and focused on, their own type of things. And other neurotypical men perceive this to be like, oh, well, he's weak, he's meek, and we can do something with him. But the thing is, he's also being seen by other women as highly attractive. So we can weaponize, him not being able to actually socially function properly against him. Because that's how most neurotypical men interact with other men who they can see as competition. They're going to find a weak spot, they're going to search for a weak spot. At the moment they found that, they're going to exploit the fuck out of it. Now, with men who are dyspraxic, it's very easy, because most men who have dyspraxia are very clumsy and, cannot practically do a lot of things the conventionally right way. So it's very easy, if they are conventionally attractive but they are dyspraxic, to equate them to be the dumb but the hot jock in that sense. And all they actually struggle with is actually processing information and translating that information differently to their nervous system that allows them to move properly due to their motoric dysfunction. And with, let's say, gifted men, I think gifted men tend to have the most issues because not only are, if you like, we talk about neurodivergent, conventionally attractive men, not only are they gifted or highly gifted, exceptionally gifted, whatever, in what domain, whether it's like intellectually gifted, creatively gifted, or in any type of way, giftedness in association with neurodivergence, they're hot too. So most men think, okay, so he's 6'3", and he has a symmetrical face, and women are attracted to him. He is a good-looking dude, but not only that, he is gifted, and that's different from being smart because gifted people have gifts. They can do things that are out of the ordinary. So that's like double competition all on one. So neurotypical men are definitely going to perceive them as a threat that they may not be able to actually conquer all by themselves. That's why a lot of gifted, attractive men tend to be perceived or painted out as assholes, as arrogant, narcissists, and whatnot, because the combination of being gifted and a conventionally handsome man is just too lethal. It's just too lethal for too many neurotypical men who feel inferior to that. So they're getting ostracized immediately. Their character is being tarnished. Their character is being ridiculed and whatnot. So neurodivergent attractive men in most, different types of divergences, they're being preyed upon based off their weaknesses, and that's why they cannot really get along with other men, because having relationships with other men as a dude, you rely on social cues and social status signaling, because in a group of men you always have like a leader, and you always have like a clown, and you always have like the entertainer, the smart guy, the guy who gets all the chicks, the alpha dude. You have all these different archetypes with men amongst each other. But if you're neurodivergent and you don't pick up on these social cues, or you just refuse to conform to these things, they immediately equate you being, an asshole, an arrogant narcissist, gay, anything like that, because you don't respond to these things, and they assume that you are competition because you're highly attractive. But if you don't play the social game, then neurotypical men who look average feel more threatened, because they're like, and he's attractive, and he's this, but he also doesn't play the game, yet the game favors him. You know what I'm saying? So for a lot of neurotypical men, this screams highly competition. This screams help. I am in competition. I need help. So most neurotypical men are going to link up with other neurotypical men to ostracize the neurodivergent, conventionally attractive dude. And neurodivergent men are just there like, well, I know that I'm handsome, I know that I'm tall, buff, whatever. And they often get targeted by other neurotypical men to, let's say, for an example, do measurements. And this is what a lot of men do, which I found disgusting, is that they literally stand next to the neurodivergent, conventionally attractive man and be like, okay, well, who's taller? Who's buffer? Who got the bigger dick? Who got the bigger biceps? Who got a bigger blah, 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 blah. All these things, like, they're going to measure all these things, because neurotypical men, despite people thinking that they're like low stimulus or whatnot, they do analyze things to a default if they feel threatened in what type of way. And they will do all sorts of things in order to set the record straight. That's why a lot of neurotypical men just bully autistic, ADHD, gifted, dyspraxic, dyslexic, dyscalculic men. They just do that. So to have a relationship with other men or build male relationships whether it's friendships, platonic, whatnot, is going to be difficult because 99% of most men are going to be your enemy because you look better than them in the first place. And the reason why, because they want to see who's most compatible to getting another woman. And the funny thing is let's say for an example, you are homosexual, you're bisexual, you like men, and you are a gay, neurodivergent, conventionally attractive man, and you deal with other men, and if you also say that you are gay, then surprisingly enough, they're actually going to be like, oh, well, more women for us. And it's not very likely in this climate that you are going to get bullied if you are gay and attractive, because most men are like, well, you will not threaten my place to getting a female because you don't like women that way. So you're out of the competition. So we are not bothered unless the neurotypical man is secretly closeted on the down low, bisexual and whatnot. That can also happen. And to talk about it, most neurodivergent, conventionally attractive gay men are oftentimes a victim of down low men. They're being preyed by down low men who are on the down low. They're secretly gay in the closet. And because they perceive their sensitivities as like vulnerabilities and not being able to pick up social cues, like, okay, well, that's a way to prey upon that. They're going to pick out these men to sexually experiment with and then throw them aside because they can always say like, okay, well, that never happened because in your opinion, in your perspective, but you have autism, so you experience the word differently. They're going to play that game. They're going to, use your neurodivergence against you. That's why the best thing you can do if you are neurodivergent and you are a man, you are a handsome neurodivergent man, the best thing you can do is be friends with women, because women tend to be more accepting of neurodivergence and whatnot, and because neurodivergence is often seen as like, okay, less threatening because you don't have that neurotypical male standard way of perceiving women like objects and whatnot. Of course, depending on the neurotype, women tend to be more acceptable with neurodivergent men because they tend to bond over creativity and whatnot, and also oftentimes being misunderstood by other men. And that doesn't really tarnish like the masculinity. This is not about masculine versus feminine type of video. This has to deal with conventionally neurodivergent attractive men who are being preyed upon or who get into conflicts with other men and what they can actually do. And oftentimes it's either being alone or deal with other neurodivergent men, or simply put, deal with women, depending on the sexual orientation, of course. But if you are a conventionally attractive, autistic, ADHD gifted man, you have a different neurotype, so you're neurodivergent, it's very difficult to actually deal with other men because other men tend to bully you. And our first bullies, when we experience things like middle school and high school, college, whatnot, are always other men. There are always other neurotypical men who want to bully neurodivergent men for thinking different, for behaving differently, for feeling differently and whatnot, and actually giving us PTSD due to social exclusion and whatnot. And because neurodivergence is always weaponized, because most of the neurodivergent labels are still sadly categorized as mental illnesses, whenever a conflict happens between a neurodivergent male and a neurotypical male, it's very easy for the neurotypical male to actually take advantage of the diagnosis of the neurodivergent male and report it to like authorities and be like, well, he has autism, he has ADHD, he has X, Y, and Z. And because most of these things are still classified as mental illnesses, they can just report you being a mentally ill man. Like neurotypical men will, create situations, provoke you as a neurodivergent man, and try to get you into social conflict and physical altercation, so they can always be like, well, you know what the thing is, he has ADHD, he has autism, and that's the reason why he behaves the way that he does. And neurodivergent men will definitely perceive you as competition. They will perceive you as a threat to their social hierarchy and you don't play by the social hierarchy. But not only that, you are able to dominate the social hierarchy because you are conventionally attractive, because you can get the woman if you are heterosexual. That confuses them even more. So that's why a lot of neurodivergent men who are conventionally attractive get into conflict with other neurotypical men. It mainly has to deal that because you are attractive, you're already read as like a dangerous zone of competition. But if you don't pick up the social cues and participate in it, yeah, that can only just escalate into them perceiving you being like arrogant, stush, and making it seem as if you are out of their league, because actually you are. So I hope that this video helped a lot of y'all. I will definitely make more videos about this topic, so stay tuned.